Would you acknowledge your success more on yourself or from the help and teachings of others?
Well, I was very lucky in life. If you tell me who your heroes are, I will make a pretty good prediction about what you're going to do. And I had the right heroes. I was very lucky in life, and my heroes never let me down, and started with my dad, and then I had others in business. And so I have had great teachers, some formal teachers, some that were just informal teachers, teachers by instinct or example. And if I hadn't had those, you know, my life, I'm sure, would have been very different. If I'd been born anyplace else. When I was born in 1930, and at the time, 1 out of 50 births in the world were in the United States. So I came in against 50-to-1 odds against being born in the United States. I would have been a disaster, you know, if I'd been born in Afghanistan or Peru or someplace. I mean, I was extraordinary. I won the lottery the day I was born, you know, by being born in this country. So have you. I mean, the odds were probably 40-to-1 against you being born in this country, and they were 5 times more likely to have been born in China, or 6 times, and 4 or 5 times more likely to have been born in India or some other place where it would not have been as easy to exploit the full potential of your talent. So we've all won the lottery in that respect, and that's just plain luck. I mean, and I was lucky to be born at this time. I mean, capital allocation is something that pays off extremely well in this society now, but it doesn't pay off in other societies, and it didn't pay off, you know, many years ago. My friend Bill Gates says that if I had been born a few thousand years ago, I'd have been some animal's lunch. You know, I can't run very fast, and I can't climb trees, and, you know, I just happen, those are talents. Nobody asked me to climb trees now, but there was a time when it might have been important. And incidentally, Bill would have been some animal's breakfast. I mean, he can't run so fast either, but in any event, you know, we are lucky. I mean, just imagine being born a couple hundred years ago with exactly the same talents and how far they would have taken you then. You know, the average person today lives so much better than the richest person lived 100 or 150 years ago. So I'm lucky in that respect. I'm lucky to be born of terrific parents. I was lucky to be raised in Omaha in a great public school system. I got a start here in the first 8 grades that gave me a foundation that later, when I went off the track a few times, carried me through, because I had a terrific grade school education right here in Omaha at Rose Hill. And one of the reasons I had it, incidentally, is kind of unfortunate, but I had that great education in part because women were being enormously discriminated against. And so a woman at that time could be a teacher, she could be a secretary, she could be a nurse, you know, and that was about it. So you had half the talent pool in the United States limited to just a few jobs. So you had an abundance of talent in those activities like nursing or teaching, because that talent with males was spread across every form of work activity there was, but with women it was concentrated in a few areas, and that benefited me. It's kind of sad because it didn't benefit those teachers, but I was very lucky, and I've really been that way all my life. And what I do is important as, you know, what a good teacher does or a good nurse does or something of the sort. You know, I think that's quite questionable. It pays off enormously well in a market economy like the United States, and but that's an accident. It didn't have anything to do with any innate ability of mine.
My name is Marina Tsed, and I attend Omaha Central High School.
Good for you.
Fine institution. Now, Mr. Buffett, technology has been a great factor in stimulating the world economy. What are your predictions for the future of the technology industry, and what is its future role in world economy and the United States economy?
Yeah, well, there's no question it's turning the world upside down. It's done it somewhat already, but it will, you know, it's just beginning, but it's moving very fast. I met Gates on July 15th, 1991. I was out there for a 4th of July celebration with a friend and who subsequently died, Meg Greenfield of the Washington Post, and she took us down to visit the Gates family. And he tried to educate me about high tech, and he'd had better luck with chimpanzees. I mean, I was really a disaster, but he's a good teacher. But one thing he told me was that at the time, he said, you know, you've got this model in your head of the world, and your model has time and distance as very limiting factors. And he said, they aren't limiting factors anymore. He said, you know, the cost of talking to somebody around the world or getting your message in front of somebody or publishing, he said, it's going to be zero, or so close to zero it doesn't make any difference. And, you know, that was revolutionary. But it's happening already in a very, very big way. And it's just, 8 years later, and it's exploding. So high-tech information technology, whatever you want to call it, is changing the world, and it's going to change it in a very, very big way. And it'll change, I mean, that's one of the things I think about in businesses we buy. We announced the purchase yesterday of a furniture retailer in Boston, in the Boston area. And, you know, I think to myself, what effect does this new world have in terms of the internet on furniture retailing? I mean, you have to think about questions like that. The changes will be huge. I played bridge yesterday with people all over the country, but I played it with people all over the world. I just sit down on my computer, and I've got some popcorn there, and I'm in khakis and a sweater, and I can have a bridge game in 30 seconds with people all over the world, and no cost to it, basically. You know, that's a lot different than trying to arrange a game with 4 people in Omaha, you know, on a day when one guy wants to play golf and another wants to watch baseball. And I mean, it changes things in a huge way. We are very fortunate. I mean, it's in the degree to which the United States leads the world in this area. I mean, we have a lead. It's hard to think of who's in second place. And 15 or so years ago, this country had an inferiority complex. It'd be hard for you to remember because you weren't old enough to be around then. But in the early 80s, we were wondering whether the Germans and the Japanese were going to own everything, and that they were going to make all the steel, and they were going to make all the cars and everything else, and the television sets, and we were going to flip hamburgers. That was the standard line. And just imagine in a short period like 15 years how that's changed around. In an important way, that's changed because of this information a revolution, where we, like I said, I don't know who you would name as being in second place in the world, but here's the most important industry in the world, and the United States has this incredible position, and we're moving all the time with that position. So I think that argues for a terrific future for the world over time, and I think it argues even more for a terrific future for this country.
What are the best ways for youth to get started now in securing their financial future?
For what to secure their financial future?
For youth.
Youth? Oh, well, it's not very complicated. It goes back to getting full use out of your own talents first. I mean, the difference between whether you're going to be earning X or 2X or 3X a year 20 years from now is going to be a function of how well, not how much talent you have, but how well you use the talents you already have. And so that is your best financial future is your own ability and your a capacity to use those abilities to their potential. And that can't be taken away from you. They can't even tax it. I mean, you know, most things, if you own a piece of real estate, if they double the taxes, they double the taxes, and that changes your ownership in the property, because now, in effect, the taxing authorities own more of it because they've got a greater command on the revenue stream. The same thing about almost any asset you have, but they don't tax what's in your head, and they don't tax your ability to start performing when you get to work in the morning and finish in the evening to your potential. One of the things that amazes me is how people who really do perform well just sort of jump out at you once you're running a business. When I got out of school, I thought, you know, everybody would behave that way, but they don't. Most people sort of go through life in a sleepwalk, and if you don't, you will stand out. So the biggest thing for your financial future is yourself. Now, beyond that, it is always being ahead of the game rather than getting behind the game. It's saving a little, no matter how you do it. I mean, I delivered papers, I worked at Penny's, I sold golf balls, I had a pinball machine around. I did a lot of things that enabled me to accumulate about $10,000 by the time I got out of school. 10,000 doesn't go as far now as it did then, but having anything so that you're ahead of the game and not getting behind the game is enormously important. I mean, just, you know, if you're going to run a 100-yard dash against a bunch of people in life, if you can figure it out so that when the gun goes off, you're 10 or 15 yards ahead instead of 10 or 15 yards behind, it's going to make an enormous difference in how that race comes out. So having some net resources doesn't make much difference whether they're in stocks or bonds, in my view, but and not having debt when that gun goes off when you get out of school is a huge plus over being behind the game. And you know, it may come from delivering a paper out in the morning, it may come from part-time work someplace, but put aside a few dollars for yourself so that when the time comes and you enter the workforce, you're ahead of the game and not behind. And then once you get there, don't get behind by buying a whole lot of things that you figure you're going to pay for someday while you're paying 20% interest in between.
Students, if you could please say your name and school when you ask a question.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see even where the microphone is, but I can.
My name is Patrick Doherty, and I'm from Pillion La Vista High School. I was wondering, with the increasing costs of education today, what can students do to deal with their debts once they're out of college?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess I'd pay it off as fast as I could, and I would incur as little debt as possible before that time came. And I would say this, in my experience in business, there is very little difference, if any, between a very high-priced business education and what's available for a lot less money. So I went to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln my last year in college. I went to Wharton for a couple of years before that. I learned just as much at the University of Nebraska as I did at Wharton. And it's nothing against Wharton. I mean, it's just we had a very good school here. I had some terrific professors at Lincoln. And so I would not assume that if I was paying a few $1,000s for an education here in the state, for example, versus paying huge amounts elsewhere, that it was going to make a lot of difference. A lot of the education, you need to be prodded in the right direction, but an awful lot of it is self-taught. I mean, Andrew Carnegie did a wonderful thing in this country in terms of libraries, and I used to spend a lot of time at libraries. I even got locked in at the University of Omaha, what was then the University of Omaha, and I couldn't get out for hours. And one night I got so entranced with what I was reading. But there's all kinds of information available now with the internet. It's so much easier than it was then. So it's out there to be taken, and it isn't necessary to pay $30,000 or $35,000 a year to go to some big name school to get the education at all. I mean, if you're going to learn accounting, which is probably the most important course you'd take in business, if you're going to learn accounting, you can learn accounting absolutely as well, in my view, going to UNO as going to Harvard. I mean, I see, I'd bet on that. And so I wouldn't run up huge bills in terms of getting a business education. Now, if you're going to get a medical education, I mean, there's certain professions where there may not be any way around spending a fair amount of money and getting in debt to some degree. You've got to make that decision yourself, but I'd certainly try to minimize it. And I would have it figured out how I would handle that debt in, say, a 5-year period after I got out of school, or I would think twice about incurring it. There's a question up here, if we can bring a microphone.